Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. I've always wanted to make a bag with lots of pockets, so today I'm going to make a crossbody messenger bag with lots of pockets. I got this brown plaid fabric from the fabric store, and for the lining I'm just going to use this leftover fabric from a previous project. Without further ado, let's get started. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. I started out by cutting out the pattern pieces. They were all rectangles, so it was pretty easy, especially because there were already lines on the fabric, so I could make sure everything was perfectly straight. For the pieces that I had to cut two of, I cut them out separately because I wanted to make sure they were aligned with the squares on the fabric, because it will look off even if it's a little bit crooked. In case you're interested, these are the measurements for the pieces I cut out. And this is what all the pieces looked like. I got 1.5 yards of the plaid fabric and I still had a good amount left, so 1 yard will probably be enough. My fabric was on the flimsier side, so I put interfacing on every single piece, including the lining, which took a very long time because I wanted it to be much stiffer than it was. Even then, I don't think it was stiff enough, so I recommend getting something stiffer like a canvas fabric. Next, I started working on the front pocket pieces, where first I rounded out the bottom corners using a can of tomatoes. I did this for both the lining and the main fabric pieces. It doesn't really matter what you use as long as you round it out, and I just had this laying around, so that's why I used it. And if you wanted, you don't even have to round it out, you can just keep the sharp edges, but it's all up to you because it's your bag. Then I put the lining and the main fabric pieces right sides together and sewed all along the edges, but left a gap on the top so that I could turn it right side out. Afterwards, I cut the corners and cut notches along the curve and turned it right side out. Then I top stitched along the top to make it closed, and I did this to both pieces. Now I could go onto the flap. I did the same thing of rounding out the bottom corners with the can of tomatoes, and then I put the two flap pieces right sides together and sewed all along the edges except the top. Again, I cut notches along the curve and turned it right side out. I ironed it flat and then top stitched along where I just turned it right side out. Next, I got one of the pieces for the body of the bag so that I could sew on the pockets I made earlier. I put it 4 centimeters from the side and bottom and just top stitched it all along the side and bottom edge to secure it in place. I made sure to pin it before I sewed it so that it doesn't move around anywhere while I'm sewing. I forgot to mention, but I also rounded out the bottom corners for all the bag body pieces as well. Next, I took the body piece without the pockets and put the flap on right sides together and sewed all along the top. All the pattern pieces have a 1 centimeter seam allowance, so that's what I used to sew everything together. Next, I went on to making the strap, which is the one that is really long, and folded it in half, then folded each half into each other, and then ironed the whole thing in half so that I could top stitch along both sides to complete the straps. To make the side pockets, I hemmed the top of both side pocket pieces and folded about 1 centimeter of the bottom to the wrong side and ironed it down, and then put them 10 centimeters away from each side of the side/bottom piece. I flipped them over the bottom so that I could sew along the ironed crease. Then I flipped them back and sewed down both sides so they would stay in place. While sewing everything, I tried really hard to match up all the lines on the pattern of the fabric, but some parts just didn't work out. But some other parts lined up really nicely, but it's okay if they don't match up. Then I went on to attach the straps to the edge of the piece we were just working on. I sewed the straps to the side/bottom piece right sides together, making sure it was centered. I made sure to sew it within the seam allowance so it wouldn't show in the finished piece. You also want to make sure that the straps aren't twisted. Now I can attach one of the body pieces to the side/bottom piece by putting them right sides together and sewing all along the edge. First I pinned each edge and then just worked my way down to make sure that everything fit in place. I recommend sewing with the body piece on the bottom so that you can control it more and that it doesn't bunch up, because the side/bottom piece does tend to bunch up more because it's on a curve. Now we can do the same exact thing with the other side of the body piece. Make sure that the straps and flap are out of the way so that you don't sew on top of them. For the inside pockets, I folded them in half right sides together and sewed all along the edge, leaving a gap to turn them right sides out. After turning them right sides out, I top stitched the top and then top stitch it to the center of the lining pieces. I also sewed along the center to turn it into 2 pockets. I repeated the same thing that we did with the main pieces where we put it all together for the lining. Then I turned the lining right sides out and put it in the main fabric one, which was still flipped wrong sides out. I sewed all along the top edge of the bag, leaving a gap so I could turn it right sides out. And here I'm just turning it right sides out. I think the gap I made was a little bit too small, so next time I would make it bigger because you're not going to be able to see in the end anyways. Then you can put the lining in the main bag and top stitch all along the top edge of the bag to keep everything nicely in place. Once I tried it on, the straps were a little bit too long, so I made it shorter by overlapping a part of it and sewing it down. And this is the finished bag. I think it looks really cute, but it is a little bit too flimsy for my liking, so I would definitely use a thicker fabric next time. I tried putting a cardboard stabilizer in the bottom and sides, but then it was too stiff and it looked really weird. But besides that, I'm pretty happy with the bag, and I also wanted to say thank you so much for 100 subscribers. So if you aren't already subscribed, please make sure to do so.